So let's get ourselves the very latest on the crisis from on the ground. Joining me from the eastern Ukrainian city of Lviv, Alistair Bunkle. From the southern port city of Odesa, Nick Martin, and in the Polish capital, Warsaw, of course, a hub for refugees fleeing the conflict, Lisa Holland. Good to see all of you. But Alistair, let's turn to you first for an overview of what we have seen overnight. I mean, certainly the latest MOD briefing suggesting, OK, it may be a slow advance, but the Russians do continue to encircle Kiev.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. They have, in their morning update, that sort of infamous column outside of Kiev of around 40 kilometres long that got bogged down for many days. Well, now that the weather has cleared a little bit and new satellite imagery has been obtained, it looks as though that column has dispersed somewhat, which means the Russians have probably successfully taken out some of the vehicles within it and redistributed them around the Ukrainian capital. Nonetheless, the Ukrainian armed forces have done a very, very good job at not only slowing that column down, but destroying many of the vehicles within it. But it speaks really to what looks to be the Russian strategy at the moment, and that is to encircle the capital, as it has done with other cities like Mariupol, and probably strangle it over a number of days and use, rather than ground forces that have been pretty ineffective thus far, things like artillery barrages to pummel towns and cities into submission. And air raid sirens in the middle of the night, waking us up here and across the country as the fear of more Russian airstrikes still persists. And so the grinding war goes on, but it is a grinding war that is seeing Russia slowly advancing for now, despite the very brave Ukrainian resistance.
Alistair, thank you. Well, let's move on to Odesa, where we'll find Nick Martin. Of course, Nick, Odesa clearly a strategic target for the Russians, but the people where you are preparing for them.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Odesa is and always has been high on the list for Vladimir Putin. It is a key port on the Black Sea. It used to be the jewel in the crown of the Soviet Union, and it would be strategically and militarily a very key city for Vladimir Putin and his military forces to seize, because it would effectively cut off Ukraine from the sea, and it would give the Russians a lot more power of what comes in and out of this country. We know that there is fighting 2 or so hours up the road east at Mykolaiv. They've been constantly shelling that city for a few days now, and we know that there has been shelling overnight. That, again, another key port city. And so that effort to try and cut off from the Black Sea is well underway. And they are preparing, unfortunately, for a similar thing here at Odesa. Yesterday, we were down on the beaches watching volunteers filling sandbags. They've filled 350,000 of them in the last 2 weeks, and they are now fortifying shop fronts and buildings and cultural sites, the Opera House, and there are barricades on all of the streets, those big iron crosses, hedgehogs that are designed to stop the flow of tanks coming down the street. There are soldiers everywhere, and they are very resilient. They're saying that the Russians won't even get here. I spoke to an old man on the street yesterday who said, we'll send the Russians back. But the fact is that Odesa is on Vladimir Putin's list, and we know that the fighting and the shelling is getting closer, and the people here are just bracing themselves. We were in a humanitarian aid station yesterday, a place that just 3 weeks ago was a kind of trendy food hall, is now preparing itself to bring casualties, food, first aid kits. When we were filming, the air raid sirens went off. We were ushered down into the basement, and a load of young people, volunteers, sat there for about half an hour listening to a guy play on the guitar. A girl in the corner was crying, and there's a lot of uncertainty here. And so this city, I have to say this morning, is very quiet. But when you take a walk around, it is quite unbelievable to see the barricades and the fortifications and the troops and the tanks preparing for what might come to Odesa potentially in the next few days. There were unconfirmed reports of Russian warships just off the coast here in the Black Sea. There are some sightings from Western Crimea, not far from here, had suggested that they'd seen amphibious boats off the coast. That could suggest that the Russian army would mount an assault from the beaches here, which is why they are being very cautious, and they're looking out to the Black Sea, wondering whether those Russian forces will attack from there or possibly from the east.
Well, let's leave Odessa for now and head over the Polish border to Warsaw. We will find Lisa Holland. Lisa, we were speaking yesterday about the huge number of refugees that are pouring over the border and the problems that that's creating. I suspect that in the 24 hours since we last spoke, well, things haven't got any better.
No, and in fact, whilst there's absolutely no doubt at all that there is genuinely a warm welcome here and real empathy for what people are going through, those who fled across the border, the authorities are not trying to dress it up as anything else other than the fact that they are under a huge amount of pressure. In fact, the mayor has been tweeting saying things are getting more and more difficult by the day, and that just about sums it up, really. This is not a crisis that's kind of happened and now they're dealing with the aftermath. This is ongoing. This is an emergency, and more people are arriving. Almost kind of difficult to keep track of the numbers, but we know that 2.5 million people have poured over the borders into neighbouring countries, and the lion's share have come here to Poland. And what that means is that, along with volunteers and the authorities in Warsaw, they need to literally kind of pick up the pieces of people who are getting off trains and buses, absolutely exhausted, across on the border. You've got people kind of coming over on cars, walking over. So they literally kind of need something to eat, something to drink, somewhere to sleep. So that's kind of the initial emergency couple of days. But then it's only just begun, because most of the people that I've been talking to here don't want to go on to another country. It's not like a kind of normal migration crisis where people say, right, I want to kind of rebuild my life and end up in the UK because I've got relatives there or something like that. Some people, of course, do have relatives, but most people just kind of want to stay put here so they can get back home as quickly as possible. And the key thing, of course, is that, kind of as we all know by now, the men, the husbands, the brothers, the fathers, they've stayed behind. So women and children here, this is a women and children refugee crisis. They all want to sort of get back home, and they're absolutely frantic and worried sick and just trying to get a text message or something which says to them, look, I'm okay, our house is okay. We've spoken to lots of people who've said, look, I've had a message to say, our house has gone, I can't get hold of my husband's in the army, etc., etc. It goes on and on and on. And so, in a nutshell, the authorities here having to kind of pick up the pieces with all of that, to the point now that there's talk of trying to bus people to other cities, and inevitably there'll be questions from the Polish government about what the rest of Europe can also do now to support Poland.
Lisa Holland in Warsaw, Nick Martin in Odessa, and of course Alistair Bunkle in Lviv. Thank you all.